Hey guys, Matthew here. Welcome to my first actual guide of the boss killing series. So this is basically going to be Hydra. The way I'm going to go about it is I'm going to go top down on the Uncharted realm, and we are going to start at the top, and after we've done all of the Uncharted realms, we're going to go to bosses that are not part of it, such as Maven, Cyrus, etc. So let's look at Hydra real quick. I went ahead and ran the map, so I'm going to be running these maps white. Now the reason for that is because there's no reason to not run it white at the very moment, especially for explaining the mechanics. It's going to allow me to take a little bit more time and focus on what's going on. But let's talk about Hydra. So Hydra is a Shaper Guardian. Guardian of the Hydra is available basically through the lair of the Hydra. Now if you don't know how to get these Guardian maps, they are essentially random drops from your Awakener level bonus. As you can see, it says Awakener level bonus, Awakener level 9. It gives me 4.5% chance for a Shaper Guardian map to drop off a unique boss tier 14 plus. That means that every single time I finish a map, I kill a boss in a T14 plus map, there's a chance that I get a Guardian map, and it could be a Shaper Guardian map, and it could be Hydra. Note, very important thing to note is that you can actually Horizon Orb these maps into different Guardians if you wanted to. This does not work for the Elder Guardians, but it does work for the Shaper Guardians, if I remember correctly anyways. So that's pretty much how you acquire the maps if you're not going to be buying them from other players. Okay, so now let's have a look at Hydra itself. So Hydra has basically 3 things to look out for. She has the Doom Arrow, which is 9 additional projectiles, not really anything to worry about there. Barrage, which is basically like also kind of like almost melee range-ish. And there is Fork Arrow. Fork Arrow is the one that is really deadly. Basically, the boss is going to shoot an arrow, which is going to fork in a bunch of different directions, and it can pretty much one-shot you in a character like I have right now. If I die, it's probably going to be to that. The other thing that can kill me is this here, right? So basically, the room on both sides are going to have these like cannon thingies, and they're going to shoot a bunch of frost bolts, and these will also basically one-shot me. So now let's talk about how do I prevent getting one-shotted. So there's a few things you can do. You could use a Sapphire Flask, which would give you 20% less cold damage taken, which is really big for a boss like this, because most of the damage that Hydra does is basically cold. You could use an Aquamarine Flask, which is kind of the same thing, but instead of basically making it so you take less damage, it's more that you avoid the actual cold damage. Now, this is not quite as useful, but they do stack together. If you really wanted to, if you don't mind actual flask swapping for bosses, it is the best way to make it as easy as possible, because you could actually stack these 2 different flasks. We also have a Basalt Flask, which is an additional 15% flat physical damage reduction. So the way that Hydra does damage is basically most of it is going to be cold. Well, it's going to be 50-50 basically. It's going to be half cold and half physical. So nullifying some of that physical damage is a good idea. And then we can also, if we're working on or using a build that is more so dodge based, we can also use a Quartz Flask. This is going to give us 10 additional % for attack and spell dodge. So that's another way to mitigate some damage by not getting hit. We can use a Stibnite Flask if we have a very high evasion build. Thinking, for example, Trickster build loves Stibnite Flask. It gives them so much actual survivability. And the Smoke Cloud, for those who don't know, actually blinds targets that are in it, which makes it so they're less likely to hit you. We also have a Jade Flask, also common, you'll use for, evasion stacking builds. And we have a Granite Flask. So Jade is basically just flat evasion. You can look at your path of building to see how much that is going to give you. Granite Flask, however, is a little bit different because of the way that armor works in this game. The way that armor works in this game is that it's really good for small hits. So this Granite Flask here, this 3000 armor, essentially is going to take 10% of that, right? 10% of that armor is going to be basically nullified completely from the upcoming hits. So if I had 3000 armor, right, that means that 300 damage is going to be completely nullified. The rest, the 2700 armor remaining, is basically not really going to do a whole lot for me. So if I take a hit of 100 damage and I have 3000 armor, it's going to do 0 damage. If I take a hit of 1000 damage and I have 300 armor, it's going to do 700 damage. That's kind of like the easy way to explain it. I believe there's a whole like actual calculation and whatnot, but it's a lot more complicated than that. but if you keep it that simple, it makes it pretty easy. So now that we know what we're getting into, this is essentially what we could do. So I could go ahead and basically have my my flash swaps available in my inventory. I could swap them around the time I get to the boss itself, but I'm personally going to try to just focus on not getting hit. And because I'm a softcore gamer, I really don't care about dying. So one of the things that I'll do is I'll open up a portal right before the boss. So if I die, I'll be able to get right back into the fight. All right, so we're going to go ahead and walk up to the boss, make sure that we don't get hit by these frostbolts. So this is the barrage right there. This is the forking thing, and this is like the little, yeah, this is the barrage thing that would really kill us really quickly. We also have, yeah, the fork shot. That can also kill us pretty much in one hit. I'm not sure what she's aiming at, or this boss is aiming at, but there we have it. So these are essentially the mechanics of the fight. So long as we don't really get hit by any of it, as you can see, it is actually a pretty slow encounter, right? There's not really anything that can kill me if I'm just paying attention, even just a little bit. So let's talk about, real quick, which map modifiers, right, can I actually not do on this map? Which map modifiers would be really bad? Well, because this is a bow-based boss, and because especially the fork arrow, and that little arrow nova thing that the boss also does, what I don't want to be doing on this map is +2 projectile. +2 projectile is really deadly, because not only does it apply to Hydra, but I believe it also applies to the cannons. So they end up doing ridiculous amounts of damage, and you end up with a tremendous amount of these actual frostbolts on your screen, to the point where it's pretty much impossible to dodge all of them. So this is the first map mod that I don't want to be dealing with. The second map mod would be something like a temporal chains, or something that would slow me down and make it so I'm not able to actually dodge all of this. That being said, this is easily you know, made up for through a warding flask, something that is pretty much mandatory, so I'm not going to worry too much about that. It really is just +2 projectile. The only other thing, the only other modifier that I really don't want to be doing on this map is going to be other than the +2 projectile, is going to be turbo. And what I mean by turbo is things like frenzy charge on hit, because that's going to make her faster, or the boss faster anyways, or something like attack and cast speed, because that's going to make it much harder for me to dodge, as I'm going to be you know, constantly having to deal with a lot more attacks coming my way, which means I'm going to have a much less of a damage window to actually kill the boss. So I'm going to go ahead, and now that you guys have seen how really easy it is to do these bosses, or at least this specific boss, I can literally run around here for ages and not get hit. Why? Because there's nothing that can really do damage to me so long as it doesn't touch me, right? So we're going to go ahead and just put down our totems. Make sure that we properly debuff. Now, as we start doing more damage to the boss, the arena is going to become more and more convoluted with the frostbolts. As the boss gets lower, I believe more of these frostbolts are actually going to be showing up, which is definitely very deadly for us. So we are going to want to kill this boss quite quickly. Now, remember at the start of the video, I said something about the fact that it doesn't matter if I run this boss white. What do I mean by that? So there's a couple different things that you care about when killing bosses, especially guardian bosses. The first thing is the fragment. The fragment doesn't get affected by anything on the map, the modifiers, the quantity, the rarity, anything like that. Doesn't matter. It's always going to drop 100% of the time. This is the main thing that we care about. The second thing that we care about is actually dropping the invitations. One thing that I didn't drop here. And what I mean by the invitation is the invitation that is specific to this boss, or at least this set of boss on the Uncharted Realm. So in this case, that would be the Formed. And this also does not get affected by quantity or rarity or anything like that. It seems to be a flat 20% chance. So what that means is that every time you do 4 of the bosses, right, you are nearly always going to be dropping one of them every 4 bosses, which means you're almost going to be able to self-sustain your own invitations. And yeah, this doesn't get affected by quantity or rarity or anything like that. No pack size, nothing. So the only reason that we would care about actually putting quantity or rarity on our actual map, and to try to make it as juicy as possible, is for map drops. Something that is very important in a league start scenario, as a single map can pay for a portion, or a pretty decent portion, of the actual boss. It's the boss map itself, right? So it is important to be able to juice up these maps. That being said, in a league start scenario, right, when you're just focusing on trying to make as much currency as possible, it is actually perfectly fine to not juice up your maps initially until you actually get a little bit of a better build going in order to be able to do these maps fully juiced, because you're going to have a lot more damage, right? You saw how my damage was nothing to write home about. Sure, I was able to kill it. Sure, it was deathless, whatever. But it wasn't like my damage was incredibly high. It took a little bit of time to kill. This is something to be expected on gear that looks as bad as this, but the fact remains that we can do it, and as long as we can do it, especially if we can do it without any real struggle, then that means that we can actually farm a ton of currency just through the sheer fact that we are able to do it, and most other people will not be able to do it. So anyways, that's pretty much it for the first boss guild guide, focusing on mechanics and whatnot. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Hopefully this covers everything that I had to cover for this specific boss. This is going to be the format of the upcoming videos. The other ones are probably going to be shorter, as I had to over-explain this one. There's a lot of things that I won't repeat myself over, like all 4 of the Guardian maps for each set of bosses. But yeah, let me know what you guys thought. Before I go, though, as always, I want to say a massive thank you to my supporters: Joseph, Adicus, Don, Brandon, Fruitfly, Reese, Panda, Central, Adorant, Welcome Back, Neroth, Jacoff, Thomas, Nike, The Great Master, Raymond, Alex, ML, Tim, Grimoire, Lost with the Map, Flame Scorpion, Nathaniel, Richard, Johnny, Scott, Ronald, Willie D, Kevin, Moonkiss, Mercury, Bitizen, and Axel. So it's a massive thank you to everybody else who has supported me in the past or who wishes to remain anonymous. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this first episode, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.